Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. My name is Angelia, and it's time for Friday Reads on July 14th. It is somehow already the middle of the month. I was riding that wave of feeling like it was the beginning of July for a long time, maybe partly because people are still putting out June wrap-up videos, which, by the way, I didn't do one, but I usually don't do one. I'm a very sporadic wrap-up video maker. I do one about once every 4 months, but that's neither here nor there. It's the middle of July. It definitely feels like the middle of July here in Satan's lobby, but anyway, enough about the weather. Let's talk about what's going on this week. Let's start with TV. It's not exciting. We are still watching Hijack, but it's got to be near the end because the structure, they did the 24 structure, if you ever used to watch that show, where every episode is an actual hour. So they're on a flight that is a 7-hour flight, and every episode is the next hour. The whole thing is preposterous and silly, but we're still watching it. And then also we're watching Perry Mason, and we're in season 2, the new one with Matthew Rhys. It's visually really cool because they've recreated the 1930s Los Angeles. I like Los Angeles stories, but it is an uneven. It is an uneven show, and I see why maybe it didn't get picked up after the 2 seasons, because it's good and then it's not. It's kind of up and down. I do like the way that they look at different aspects of life at that time beyond just the scope. I mean, kind of within the framework of the mystery that they're working on, but by having the characters being more diverse, they're able to explore different aspects of what it was like to live and work in the early 30s in Los Angeles. So I guess the core characters probably in the old TV show were just all white and straight, and now they're not. And so that gives the show more room to look at different layers of life and what things were like. So that's interesting, but overall it's just okay. I want to watch the new, it's why can't I talk today? It's like a mini series, a documentary, Last Call, from the book by Elon Green. I did read that last year for Nonfiction November, and it was really good. I don't read a lot of true crime, but this book was really good, and it is about a serial killer that was targeting gay bars in New York City in the 90s. And it really focuses on the victims and the community, the atmosphere and community in the bars, and what that provided for the people that went there, and the problems. I know you're shocked to hear problems with the police department. Anyway, the book was really good, and it wasn't just a kind of lurid thing. And from the reviews that I've read, they stick to that format also in this show. So if you've seen it, let me know, because it looks good. And Stephen didn't read the book, so I know how it turns out and whether or not they ever solve the case, but he doesn't know, and either do you if you haven't read the book. So I think it would be a good show to watch. Also, Reservation Dogs season 3 is coming out pretty soon in the next couple weeks, so I'm excited about that too. All right, let's move on to the books. So this week I did finish 2 books, and there's a third one that I'm still reading that I've talked about before. And I know exactly what I'm reading in the upcoming week because I have some time-sensitive things that I must attend to. So first of all, when last week I was in the middle of Howard's End by E.M. Forster, and I did finish that, and I really loved Howard's End. I did not remember much at all from reading this back in the day. And I think when I read it before, I probably read it either in association with watching the movie or in association with having read A Room with a View and loving it. And then I read this, and I don't think at the time that I appreciated it as much as I do now. I think that back then I found it to be not as fun and charming as A Room with a View. And it isn't, because it's a completely different story, and it's a deeper story. but now I'm there for that. So A Room with a View does have a lot of issues about society and men and women and love, but ultimately it is a romance. And Howard's End is not really that kind of a story. It's also, I think, his longest book. I mean, I think it's about 390 pages. And just looking at the other books, it appears to me to be his longest book. So he really has time in this novel to go past just the surface plot and really dig in with the conversations and the thoughts of the main characters. And I briefly talked last week about how this book is about two sisters. There's actually three siblings, the Schlegels, who are they're adults. At the beginning of the story, the youngest one, Tibby, the boy, is a teenager, and then there's two young adult women, and their parents have passed, in years ago, and they are living off of their inheritance trust funds. And Margaret and Helen are very involved in London with the arts, in philosophy, they get together in social groups that like to debate issues of the day, political issues, social issues, artistic issues. They kind of live this life of culture and the mind, and they're not concerned with money or work. And the youngest one, he doesn't really have any ambitions. He idly goes off to Oxford. He's got his head in the books, and he's really just concerned with a nice pot of tea and some good scones. And I don't know if he's supposed to be an unlikable character, because maybe something's wrong with me, but I actually really like Tibby. I find him to be he's just sort of funny, and his general sense of breezing in and out of the story and being more or less unbothered by almost everything, I just sort of enjoyed it. And there's a lot about relationships, men and women, about the role of women, communication, and trying to form that real connection with other people. I mean, that famous line, "Only connect," is from this book. And it's hard to get into all the things that it's about, but it really is worthwhile to take your time and really read and look at what people are trying to say in the conversations versus what does connect with the person they're talking to, and the difficulty of really, when you're trying to figure yourself out, and there's misunderstandings. I think that the sister relationship is spot on in this book, and the ups and downs and the frustrations that they have with each other, but the deep love and loyalty that they have for each other all the way up to the end. So I did see there is I saw the film from long ago, and that's a good movie, but I saw there's a more recent adaptation that is maybe like a 4-part thing, and I would really like to see it. I don't think it's on a channel that I can get, but I'm going to double check, because I would like to see that where they have laid it out with a little more time to go into the story. And when I looked it up, people did mention that the guy playing Tibby is a scene stealer in this adaptation. And so since I am a surprise Tibby fan, I kind of want to see that. I really recommend it, especially if you've enjoyed other books by Forster, if you enjoy books of this time period, early 1900s, Edith Wharton. Give it a shot. So after Howard's End, I felt a strong desire to move forward in time, but I didn't come all the way up to the contemporary time. I stopped around 1960, and I reread Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, and I have talked about this a couple of times that I was planning to reread this before Kirk Manifesto comes out, which is coming out, I think it is released on the 18th, in a few days. And so I felt like I needed to refresh my memory. And I always wanted to reread this book because I read it in the dark and scary shadow of having read The Nickel Boys back right after that had come out. And so the whole time I read this, I kept waiting for it to take a strong, tragic, dark, violent turn. And there is plenty of dark thoughts and violent moments in this book, but it is totally different in tone and spirit and plot and purpose than Nickel Boys or Underground Railroad. And that's something I really appreciate about Colson Whitehead. He does not write the same book over and over. There's plenty of heist caper energy in this book, but there's also a lot more. And I love the texture of Harlem in 1961 that Whitehead paints in this story. I really feel like I could be there. Even reading it twice really cements it. He goes into detail about the layout of the streets and the demarcations of neighborhoods. And a character, Ray Carney, he knows, he's lived here all his life and he knows it so well. So when he's walking down the street, he's thinking about all the different decades of his life and what were in those buildings at those other times. And this is a story of Ray Carney, who is a young married man with one child and a second one on the way at the beginning of the story. And he owns a furniture store in Harlem. And so his clientele are Black families in Harlem that can afford new furniture. And so business is up and down depending on what's going on in the neighborhood and in the country. There's good weeks and bad weeks. It's always just barely getting by in his legitimate business. But he is, what does he say? He was only slightly bent when it came to being crooked. So his family legacy is that his father was an infamous, full-time, dedicated crook. And he has inherited a little glimmer of that. And so while he tries to keep things mostly legit, he does occasionally fence stolen items. And he has a cousin that he grew up with who is always up to no good and always entering into ill-advised ventures. And the punchline of it all, ever since they were little kids, is, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get you in trouble." And over through the years, this has happened. And so Freddie will periodically show up with some things. It might be televisions, it might be a little bit of jewelry, and Ray Carney has some connections where he can sell those items. And so at the beginning of this book, Freddie gets mixed up in something a little too big for him, and Carney gets roped into it. And then the book is in 3 sections. The middle section is particularly interesting. It's called Dorvay. And we find out that Dorvay is something that Ray Carney learned about when he was in business college. And when he had a professor who talked about it. And when he heard it like Dorvay, D-O-R-V-A-Y. But really it's a French word, Dorvay, spelled like this. And it has to do with a sleep pattern that was more common in the pre-industrial age, where people would go to bed when the sun went down and they would sleep for a few hours, and then they might get up around midnight and be active and awake for 2 or 3 hours and do all kinds of things, all kinds of productive things. It was a very busy, and the mind was fertile. And then they go back to bed and have a second sleep and get up at, daybreak. And so he heard about this and he went and researched it, and he found out that it is documented in history, and people such as Benjamin Franklin took advantage of this. And so when he's in college, he starts sleeping in the Dorvay pattern, and it helps him accelerate his studies and make A's, because he has this really active, mentally aware time in the middle of the night where he gets all this stuff done. And so moving into the time of this novel, Carney kind of reignites his Dorvay period again when he has, I don't want to give it away, but there's something that happens to him where he needs some extra time and mental energy for a somewhat crooked enterprise. Carney realizes the advantages of this Dorvay period in his world, and he describes it like this: Learned gentlemen aside, Carney knew crime's hours when he saw them. Dorvay was crooked heaven, when the straight world slept and the bent got to work. An arena for thieving and scores, break-ins and hijacks, when the con man polishes the bait and the embezzler cooks the books. In between things, night and day, rest and duty, the no good and the up and up. Pick up a crowbar, you know the in-between is where all the shit goes down. He upheld the misspelling in his thoughts, in keeping with his loyalty to his mistakes. So anyway, I don't want to give too much away, but if you have not read this book, and I feel like this book was underrated. People talk a lot about the Underground Railroad and Nickel Boys, but Harlem Shuffle is the first of a three-parter that Whitehead has planned, from what I have read. And so this book takes place in the 60s. Crook Manifesto, which comes out next week, takes place in the 70s. So maybe the third book takes place in the 80s, but it is the same characters, or some of the same characters. But if you enjoy anything that you've read previously by this author, I think you would like it. And it'll also, if you enjoy literary mysteries or crime thrillers, I liked it more when I could enjoy this second reading without being so comparative to other books. And so if you haven't read it, I would suggest picking up and reading it, and then we can move forward into Crook Manifesto. All I know about that is it takes place in the 70s and it got a Kirkus star. That was good enough for me. I've pre-ordered it. So also I am still reading The Facemaker by Lindsey Fitzharris, but I realized last night when I looked in here that it looks like I'm only halfway through, but actually I am about 3/4 of the way through, because about the last 50 pages are endnotes and acknowledgments and index and things like that. So I actually only have 2 or 3 more chapters, but that has been very interesting. And I realized that I am accidentally participating in BookTube at war by reading this book about this surgeon who pioneered facial reconstruction during World War I for injured soldiers. And I got really far in the book before I thought, you know, this book really actually is about war. And so once again, like last month, I accidentally participated in June on the Range because I read Lone Women about the last 2 days of the month. So this month, I didn't think I was doing BookTube at war, but guess what, I am. So I know that next I need to read 1984 by George Orwell, because my in-person banned book club at the library is discussing this upcoming Wednesday. So I need to start this today and get on the stick and read it if I want to take part in that. And also I need to read Take My Hand by Dolen, Perkins-Valdez. This is the last book that I need to read for the BookTube prize judging in this round, and then I can do my ratings. So these 2 books I feel that I need to read. This is what I need to read this week. And then after that, I have a little bit more leeway. But those 2 are coming up, and I think that is about it on my weekly wrap-up. So let me know what you think. Any books here that you have read and your comments on them, or something different that you read that was wonderful this week, or what you're excited about that's coming up. And I hope that you have a great weekend. I will talk to you again soon. Oh, also, I want to thank everybody for the great feedback on my Time Warp Tuesday video. It was very encouraging to see that you all were enjoying that and wanted me to do more videos in that theme. And some people said maybe they would try to do one of those videos. So I hope that it catches on. I'd love to see other people's videos where they go back in time and look at what they were reading in some other year and some other season. And I will do another one maybe in a couple of weeks. So thanks for that support. And as always, have a great week, and I will be back soon.